Hello everyone, I'm JG. Welcome back to Music Forever, where today we are reviewing Metallica's fourth album, And Justice for All. Now, for those of you that are new, I've been reviewing all the Metallica albums here on my channel. Of course, we're only up to And Justice for All, so you could already see my reviews for Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master of Puppets. There's going to be a playlist annotated at the end and in the description down below. You can check out the link to that. So please do so if you're a fan of Metallica, and the other reviews for all their other albums should be coming out in the near future. But let's talk about And Justice for All, Metallica's fourth album, and an album that began to mark some change within the band. One of the biggest changes was something that the band really didn't have much control over, and that was the death of bassist Cliff Burton, who unfortunately died in a tragic bus-related accident while touring with the band. So that left the band bassistless, so they needed to get a new one. So they got Jason Newsted, who is another great bassist, mind you. He's a great replacement for Cliff. The only problem is that you can't hear him on this album. Due to the album's mixing and production, you could barely hear the bass on this project. Now, the lack of bass here on this album is one of the main points of controversy when it comes to this project, because many people say it has to do with the fact that Jason Newsted wasn't really treated like a full band member when he first joined the band, and it was kind of, as a result of the other band members being upset due to Cliff's death, so they just kind of had the bass parts muted. He wasn't really treated like a full member at the time. And there's people in the band who say it was because the bass guitar parts sounded too much like the rhythm guitar parts, but, that doesn't really excuse the lack of bass, and it makes this entire album sound very, not just bassless, but very, grainy, dry at times, I guess you might want to say, if those adjectives make any sense. It's especially notable coming off their last album, Master of Puppets, which had some really great bass parts, such as the instrumental Orion and many other tracks that showed off great bass work. And unfortunately, you can't hear any of Jason Newsted's parts here because of the production. Now, there are, of course, fan-made remakes, I guess you could say, that have, improved the bass work, but it's not the real thing, of course. So that's just, fan work that you can just kind of hear the bass part if you really wanted to, because you're not really going to hear it on the official release. And this production also has some other problems. It makes the drums have this sort of clicking sound to them, which is unfortunate because this is some of Lars' best drum work also. Now, I know Lars gets a lot of crap in the metal community at times because, he doesn't practice his drum stuff as much as he's supposed to, and, simplifies stuff live, I guess. I haven't seen Metallica live, so I can't really comment too much on that, but whatever stuff that he's done since this album, it obviously wasn't happening back on And Justice for All, because this is some of his best drum work yet. It's just a shame that the production doesn't really benefit the drum sound all that much. It just sounds very, mechanical and kind of sounds like it's making a clicking sound rather than a drum sound at times. Now that we got that elephant out of the room, let's start talking about some of the other aspects of this album. And one of the other huge differences in this album compared to Metallica's previous works is the political overtone of this project. Now, Metallica have talked about political themes before on their previous albums, but not really to the extent that they did here on And Justice for All. Just look at the album cover and the album title, and you could tell this is going to be a political record. And it's not very super surprising for a thrash metal band, given that thrash metal is greatly inspired by punk music, which has very political overtones in general. So it kind of makes sense that many thrash bands would have political themed lyrics. But here on Justice for All saw Metallica going for it, to a grand scale. Pretty much every track here is political to some degree. And I actually really like this whole concept of having this very political album, because it allows Metallica to write about all these different themes that are happening in politics at the time and present them in a very concise manner. And a lot of the anger you hear on this album sounds very consistent with each other, given a lot of the political stuff that was happening, I guess, at the time. I wasn't living back in '98 when this was released, so I can't really comment myself about what was going on, or I'm not even too familiar about all the politics that were going on back then. But, given this album, there's clearly a lot of genuine anger that we hear on this project, and it feels very genuine here. In fact, one of the angriest moments is my favorite track in the entire track list, in Dyer's Eve, the closing track here, which has a track written about James Hetfield's parents who, in his childhood, I guess you could say, restricted his knowledge and stuff like that. He's written many tracks having to do with his parents and his relationship with them, but this track is definitely the angriest, and it's just a very angry track overall. And it's not exactly in the way that it's super in your face, screaming, heavy breakdowns and riffs and stuff like that. It's just that you could tell that the anger on this track is very genuine. It's coming from a real place. It's not overplayed just to make a very angry track to relate to all the hormonal teenagers or something like that. It's very genuine with its anger, and I really like that about it. The drum work on this track is some of the best you hear on the entire project, and some of the best that you'll hear on a Metallica track. The guitar solo is also excellent. It's overall one of my favorite Metallica tracks. And Justice for All also sees Metallica beginning to experiment with longer song lengths and more, I guess you could say, progressive-leaning tendencies. I wouldn't say this is quite a progressive thrash metal album, but it begins to show some of those tendencies that I feel like we're leaning more towards progressive thrash metal, especially on tracks like the title track, which is the second track here, a very long track, almost 10 minutes long. You have lots of riffs here. It starts off a bit slower, building up into all these different types of riffs. You have the more aggressive parts, and eventually, later on the track, we kind of get this one part where it kind of breaks down the riff, and it goes into this slower section where it's playing the riff just in a slower pattern. I think that's a really cool part of the song. It's overall a really cool track. It doesn't feel boring despite its very long length. There's not a dull moment on it. The opening track on this album, Blackened, is another highlight. Now, going in a different direction from the previous two albums, Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, which began with tracks that started off with acoustic parts before leading into heavy thrash parts, Blackened just kind of has this fade in before launching into the heavy section. It doesn't play around with any acoustic parts. It's just, straight up aggression for the most part. And lyrics that have to deal with just kind of with apocalyptic themes, how the current conditions in politics, or at least, I guess you could say the current conditions back then, were going to lead to just blackness, the end, all that kind of stuff, which is cool. And then the track One, which of course is the most popular track here on this album, a track that's a bit controversial, I would say, because it's a track that many people might point to the beginning of the Metallica sellout era, I guess you could say. I don't know. We're going to talk about this in future album reviews more than this one, but One is, I really like the track. It's a ballad track. It follows more in suit with tracks like Fade to Black and Welcome Home from the previous albums, and it starts off, of course, with the really cool kind of guitar riff that kind of builds up into the track. You have these more sad, sorrowful filled verses before getting to these very angry choruses. And of course the guitar solo is excellent. The breakdown that precedes it is also really cool. It's overall a great track, maybe a bit overrated, but still a nice change of pace in the track listing. And it still presents that anger that's very apparent throughout the rest of the track listing. And the concept of the song being from the perspective of a soldier that's kind of, lost all ways to kind of connect with the world, but they're still conscious, is a cool concept. Another track that I feel is really worth mentioning is the instrumental track To Live Is To Die, which was kind of a tribute to Cliff Burton. And this instrumental track, one of the longest Metallica made, it's a perfect example of being able to translate emotion without lyrics. The track, with just the simple instrumental parts that you get, manages to provide a wide array of emotions that the band must have been feeling after Cliff's death. The confusion, the anger, all that kind of stuff. And I know that there is a spoken word part that comes in later in the track, but, even without that part, you're still able to get all the feelings that you're supposed to be feeling from the track just based on the instrumentation. And I know that Cliff Burton actually did have a part in composing parts of this track, which, I find to a degree somewhat ironic given the production makes it so that the bass work isn't super audible here. But, he still did have a part in making this track, I guess you could say. That's kind of a cool thing that his own tribute, he kind of had a part in making it. But overall, it's a great instrumental track, and it's one of my favorites on the track listing. Overall, And Justice for All sees Metallica going in a new direction in terms of their sound, in terms of the lyrics that they were talking about, and just, taking some new risks and sections in terms of what exactly they were doing. A lot of the anger here feels a lot more genuine, a lot more, real than it did on previous albums, which just kind of felt like, hey, it's heavy metal music. Heavy metal's supposed to be angry, but here it feels a lot more genuine with the whole political things and the anger that came from Cliff Burton's death. As I mentioned before, that was just kind of an accidental death. It wasn't, it was just kind of a freak accident. So the group was just very, angry that, like, why did this happen to our bassist? Why did this happen to such a, a nice person, such a great musician? And a lot of that anger comes out on tracks here on this album also. It's just overall a great album, actually. The production is easily the biggest problem with the album, but even that doesn't hold the album back enough to really damage it. The rest of the album is so good that the album has still managed to be a great album overall, and it's an album that's widely considered to be a very good album, and given its production, I find that rather surprising. It's just, I guess you could say, it proves the quality of the rest of the material here, that even without the bass track being super easy to hear, or the drums not sounding, super great, it's still a great album. So overall, if you can't already guess, my recommendation is to definitely check this album out. I don't think it's quite as good as Metallica's previous two efforts, though I still feel like this is one of Metallica's finest moments. It's one of their strongest outputs. It has that political lyrics that you don't really get from other Metallica projects to the degree that you do on this project. It has that anger that you really don't hear on too many other Metallica projects, at least not for an entire album's length. And it just has that sort of almost progressive thrash metal leaning moments with the song structures and just the amount of riffs that they're giving you, and that you really don't get that on too many other Metallica projects, because after this album they would go in a more traditional heavy metal direction. Don't want to spoil that too much because we're gonna get there soon enough, folks. Injustice for All, great album, definitely check it out. Thank you for watching this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on those future Metallica reviews, and make sure to check out the old ones I already did. Once again, link is going to be in the description, and annotation will be at the end of the video. So yeah, make sure you subscribe. Comment down below if you have your own opinion on the album, or if there's anything you'd like to correct if I said something wrong or something like that. Thanks for watching, like the video, and stay golden.